Dang. Chapter 35. With his long sword on his back and a bundle of clothes in his hand, Aleo turned into a narrow path leading behind the Lingfu temple. As soon as he stepped across the threshold of the temple, an old monk intercepted him. "Great benefactor," he called as he rubbed his hands together, awkwardly voicing his concern. "Just take a look at our temple. The place is filled with energetic, easily excitable young lads. To keep him here long, isn't truly feasible." Aleo understood his meaning. He fished out a silver ingot from his chest pocket and gave it to the monk, patted his shoulder and proceeded inside. Standing outside the best guest room in the backyard of Lingfu Temple, Aleo tried to push the door open and failed. It was locked from the inside. So, he gently knocked twice. An arrogant voice came through the door. "Who is it?" Aleo smiled. As if playing with him, he knocked randomly on the left and right of the door. With a loud clank, the door opened. There stood Guo Xiaozhou with the door pulled to the side, glaring at him with seemingly immense displeasure. "Still remember your way here, huh?" he said as he turned into the room. Aleo obediently followed him in. Just as he shut the door behind him and was about to step into the center of the room, Guo Xiaozhou returned and locked the door. Aleo was puzzled by his action. He puffed up his chest and slammed it with his palm, suggesting that Guo Xiaozhou had no reason to be afraid while he was here, and casually unlocked the door. Yet Guo Xiaozhou insisted on going against his will. With his lips pursed, he locked the door up again. Aleo smiled at him ever so sincerely, even somewhat stupidly. He would accept anything, as long as Guo Xiaozhou was happy. Guo Xiaozhou examined him from head to toe. He didn't express dissatisfaction regarding Aleo's poor attire, nor did he dislike his suntanned skin. Instead, he complained about his negligence. "What's keeping your stupid soul busy all day long, leaving me alone, wasting away in this lowly temple?" Afraid of making him angry, Aleo circled around him and tried his best to appease him. His way of appeasing, however, was rather unusual, as he was patting Guo Xiaozhou's head like petting a puppy, which naturally stirred the anger in Guo Xiaozhou again. "Who are you trying to pet?" He pulled Aleo towards the bed, and once Aleo was down, he climbed onto the bed as well. "Just you wait for my punishment." Though his words were harsh, he acted gently, lying face down on top of Aleo without making a fuss. He pressed his soft body on Aleo's, refusing to reason with him. The long sword on Aleo's back was hurting him, so he pulled it off, held it in his hand and tossed it towards the inner side of the bed with a loud clang. Guo Xiaozhou was startled by the sudden sound, yet deep down, he felt secretly pleased at the masculinity in this man. Birds were chirping and singing outside their room, yet Aleo still didn't make another move after quite a while. Tired of waiting, Guo Xiaozhou held his angry breath as he propped himself up, slid off Aleo's body and lay next to him. He poked Aleo's chest with his fingertips. "Little mute, are you dumb or what?" Aleo used his folded arm as the pillow and looked back at Guo Xiaozhou innocently, his big round eyes shining under those eyelashes, making them appear pristine. Out of some reasons, Guo Xiaozhou blushed instantly. He muttered, "Do you know, how much silver would it cost, just for lying together with me like this?" Aleo didn't know, and he had no intention of hiding his ignorance. He shook his head in a straightforward manner. Not expecting Aleo to be so obtuse about such matters, Guo Xiaozhou awkwardly continued, "Then do you know how much does it cost to kiss me once?" Aleo shook his head again. He reached forth, smiling as he playfully pinched Guo Xiaozhou's cheek. Feeling increasingly frustrated with Aleo for not getting any of his hints, Guo Xiaozhou decided to be forthright with him. "I know what you're thinking. You saved me once and now you want me to repay you." Speaking, his hands went to pull the collar of his upper garment apart, yet Aleo responded immediately by pinning his hands down. Although he couldn't speak, his eyes talked of a tender confession, that he was taking care of Guo Xiaozhou without wanting to sleep with him. Fact was, Guo Xiaozhou also knew that Alia wasn't after that. It was his own desire that drove him crazy. "Don't try to play nice," he said, hiding away his true emotions with his experienced sophistication. "I'll give you what you want." He pulled his upper garment wide open, revealing a tempting view that couldn't be bought even with 1,000 taels of gold. Alia was awestruck as he fixed his gaze on him, watching as he fluttered his long eyelashes, watching as he bent his waist and removed his silk pants, watching as he displayed his naked body. No one could resist having such a handful of fragrant, smooth, soft flesh lying on top of his own, not to mention Guo Xiaozhou was moaning delicately in the meantime, "Little Mute, my little Mute." Alia had no other choice but to take him into his arms. The moment he did so, a hand grabbed him right on his groin. Guo Xiaozhou began to rub him through his pants. He whispered sensually, "Do you usually play it wild?" Alia shook his head, as ignorant as a country bumpkin. And so Guo Xiaozhou chuckled, yanked off his pants at one go and picked that undeveloped little thing out of Alia's pants. He held it in his hand and tried all sorts of tricks on it. Alia's tanned little cheeks were turning red. He spread his legs wide open and stared at Guo Xiaozhou in wonder, his rapidly stroking arms and the messy strands of hair hanging loose from his temples all equipped him with a mature beauty. To be stared at so intently during this deed made Guo Xiaozhou blush as well. His desire to please this man suddenly expanded like wildfire. So he crawled down, rolled up his tongue, and buried his head near Alia's groin. All Alia felt was his little penis being wrapped into something hot, and with its scorching temperature, he shivered as he stretched his feet, his toes curled tightly together as if in a cramp, his hips jerking upwards continuously as he moaned randomly in ums and ahs. Who said that eunuchs couldn't feel anything? At this very moment, Alia experienced the ecstasy of riding on the winds and tides. His half-cleansed little thing and its head, wrapped in folds of loose skin, was adeptly flipped out, repeatedly rubbed and squeezed against the tip of a hot tongue. Although it still couldn't get hard and could only tremble softly. After playing with it for a while, Guo Xiaozhou hastily began to take off his clothes. Alia allowed him to do it. At that moment, he would willingly welcome anything done to him. His body was tanned dark, yet his skin was smooth, and he had a pair of flexible, slender hands and feet. If Guo Xiaozhou smelled closely, he could even taste the green and youthful scent about this boy. Guo Xiaozhou climbed on top of him in excitement, and sat his white buttocks over Alia's strong hips. Once he sat still, he supported himself with both hands on the bedboard and started moving back and forth wildly. The more he rubbed himself against Alia, the redder and more slippery that small patch of skin became. As if in a daze, Alia opened his eyes, and saw a small, slender white object peeking out from Guo Xiaozhou's lower body. That object was his penis. Although it was small and immature, it could perform the obligations of a man and fulfill procreational purposes. Alia stared at it again and again, then he flipped Guo Xiaozhou down violently, aggressively pressed his thighs apart and felt it with his hands. "Don't touch," Guo Xiaozhou felt somewhat shy. He had no idea why he was feeling this way. Even after going through similar battles hundreds of times, he was now getting surprisingly self-conscious and bashful, all because he was with a stupid little eunuch. Alia waited, pinched it, and wanted to rub it out of curiosity. Unable to withstand the pleasure anymore, Guo Xiaozhou clamped his legs together, yet Alia wouldn't let him. With a gentle strength from his hands, which was used to wielding his long sword, Alia completely opened Guo Xiaozhou up. Guo Xiaozhou was now profoundly aroused, a sensation that he had never truly experienced when entertaining his guests. He stared at the bedboard nervously, expecting Alia to do something rough to him, and Alia fulfilled his desire. Imitating the way Guo Xiaozhou sucked him, Alia rested on top of Guo Xiaozhou's belly, and took his little thing entirely into his mouth. "Ah!" Guo Xiaozhou exclaimed, his body twitched impatiently. After which, he sensed a belated embarrassment, and stubbornly refused, "I don't need you to lick it." You don't even know. Before he could finish the word how, Elio began to suck him up and down like he was sucking on a candy. Guo Xiaozhou had it right, that he didn't know how to do it properly, yet precisely because of his innocence, he had poor control of his strength. After sucking recklessly for a few times, Guo Xiaozhou moaned as he pushed him away, turned over and released his watery seeds all over the bluish-gray bed mat of the monks. Alia watched as he released, ever so unrestrained and alluring, so much so that Guo Xiaozhou's whole body was becoming steaming red. His eyes were closed as he shouted infatuatedly, "My little mute." His words melted Alia's heart. Out of a sudden impulse, Alia was ready to risk his life for him. He hugged him, licked his face in a mess, and nibbled at his lips. Just like what Ruan Dian forced him to do with the young prostitute. Like a madman, he did them with Guo Xiaozhou for 10 or 100 times more. Guo Xiaozhou hugged him back. Affectionately and tenderly, he responded to Alia with all his heart and soul. His charming eyes were half open, and he accidentally spoke his heart, "I waited for you every day, every single day, but you never came." Alia was just a child, a young eunuch who didn't know much about romance. He had no idea what was on this male prostitute's mind, who was foolishly confident of his sophistication, to make him utter those honest loving words. All Alia understood was to treasure Guo Xiaozhou in his own way. He positioned himself face down on the bed, his buttocks raised in the air. Then he took Guo Xiaozhou's hand, and led him onto his back. Guo Xiaozhou didn't grasp his meaning at all. Having been with men for so many years, never was there anyone who asked him to be the top. In confusion, he got on top of Alia. Yet it wasn't until Alia took his hardness and attempted to stuff it into his ass that he understood what Alia was trying to do. "Wait," he uttered in surprise. "You," he began with a U, then, he panicked, and started again, "I. What about you?" Alia turned to look at him. Guo Xiaozhou abruptly threw himself into his arms, admitting with shyness, "I don't know how." Is it true that he doesn't know how? Alia wasn't sure. Perhaps it is true. He spat on his hand and used it to wet his hole. But what else could they do, other than this? Guo Xiaozhou watched on. Despite preparing for such a humiliating thing, Alia appeared so natural that he felt like they became a couple long ago. Something was burning in Guo Xiaozhou's heart, things that he couldn't quite fathom. Was it pity that he felt? Was he moved? Or, was he experiencing love, which could only be obtained by chance, and not by force? "It'll hurt a little," he said softly as he held his inexperienced little thing in his hand. "Ah." Alia lay back and nodded casually. He had been to the battlefields and back, so what big a deal was pain to him? However, things didn't exactly turn out like how Guo Xiaozhou described. The expected pain was absent. What filled his senses was an odd feeling of burning, as well as a terrible itch throughout his butt. It was a first for Guo Xiaozhou, too. And he was so excited that he acted like a puppy without a leash. "Ah," he exclaimed while doing it, pounding loudly into Alia's buttocks. In the meantime, Alia stared at the clumsy stitches on the pillow, which was crooked and distorted, probably the work of some careless young monk. As his mind wandered, Guo Xiaozhou plunged deep into him all of a sudden, catching him completely off guard. He didn't know where it stirred, but it brought out so much pleasure that his vision was turning blurry, causing his ass to tense up involuntarily. It all happened in the blink of an eye. Guo Xiaozhou came again. After his release, he rolled off Alia's body like he was paralyzed, and lay down next to him perspiring profusely. Alia was panting heavily. He felt something was getting odd, but he couldn't tell exactly. After resting for a while, Guo Xiaozhou's senses came back to him. With an inadvertent look at Alia's lower parts, his eyes immediately widened, pushing him as he said, "It's up." "What's up?" Alia was still immersed in the dizziness of having sex for the first time, but Guo Xiaozhou held his buttocks and sat on top of Aliu eagerly. Aliu could sense something happening to his little penis. It felt hot, unbelievably hot, and itchy, so itchy that it made him grunt randomly. What was more, he felt pleasure, too. He couldn't speak, so he could only grab Guo Xiaozhou's hands, and pounded his hips upwards in a frenzy. Oh, ah. Guo Xiaozhou's moan became way too seductive now, which was completely different from when he was on Aliu's back. He sounded much more passionate, and much more unrestrained, more. It wasn't enough. Although Aliu was erect, it was still just a tiny thing, and Guo Xiaozhou found it not hard enough. Yet Aliu felt as if his soul was about to jump out of his chest. It was absolutely thrilling. At the peak of their pleasure, Guo Xiaozhou placed his finger on his hole again and wriggled in. Aliu was holding his breath and pumping upwards in madness, while Guo Xiaozhou moaned as he sank deeper into their indulgence. They kissed wetly and entwined their bodies together, just like little animals in irrational mating heat. For two teenagers of about the same age, on their first time to experience the sweetness of love, neither of them were unwilling to give in. So, they let themselves go in all possible ways, from daylight to nighttime, satiating their desires over and over again. Only until the first beat of the war drum was sounded on the street did they finally stop. From afar, they could hear someone shouting, entering the city. "Murder, run for your life." Aliu got up first and hurriedly put on his clothes. With his disheveled hair, Guo Xiaozhou was kneeling on all fours on the bed mat and shivering, unable to gather himself together for a long time. Aliu got dressed and then tidied him up as well. He carried the long sword on his back and stood on the floor. Then he cleared out everything in the big wardrobe, and tried to stuff Guo Xiaozhou inside. "Help me get to Zhang Xian's place." Before closing the door of the wardrobe, Guo Xiaozhou grabbed his sleeve. "If the mob breach in, those bald donkeys will sell me for their own survival." Aliu hesitated. "Please," Guo Xiaozhou was regretting, blaming his own decision to give himself to Aliu before this. He understood well that Zhang Xian was Liao Jixiang's lifelong rival, so Aliu didn't want to go. Besides, he never had a clean relationship with Zhang Xian. Without a sweet temptation to keep him around, why should Aliu help him? Yet he had been mistaken, as Aliu immediately carried him out of the wardrobe and put him on his back. He tore the new clothes he brought into strips and tied them securely around their waists. Then, he drew out his long sword, which was silvery sharp as usual, kicked the door lock loose and dashed out into danger. End chapter. Da-dang. Chapter 36. It was already midnight when Aliu arrived at Zhang Xian's mansion. He had been stabbed several times, but they were all shallow cuts. However, he did suffer a large gash on his cheek, which left dark crimson blood smearing over half of his chin. Guo Xiaozhou shivered as he held onto Aliu. He had never experienced such a brutal scene before. As the cold blades swept past him, they seemed to have split his soul into two. Their arrival was considered late compared to the rest. When they entered the gate, the courtyard was already crowded with carriages and horses. All the prominent figures and renowned houses in Nanjing were present, including top officials from the Yang society. As they were untying the cloth-made rope from his waist, Aliu glanced towards the main seats. Zhang Xian was sitting in the middle, accompanied by Tu Yao and Xie Yulu. He was continuously shaking something in his hand, which were then scattered onto the table. They were divination coins. To the east and west sides of the hall, numerous high-ranked officials were seated. The east side belonged to the members of the Yang society, including the man with a crippled foot, Chu Feng. Aliu let Guo Xiaozhou come to the ground. Fearing that he couldn't stand steadily with his weak knees, he attentively supported him. Just as Guo Xiaozhou was about to step up into the main hall, he suddenly turned around and grabbed Aliu. "What about you? Where are you going?" Aliu pointed to the door. He was going home. "Nanjing's toughest soldiers are all here." Liao Jixiang's pitiful forces worth nothing against the mess outside. Guo Xiaozhou said contemptuously, although his hand was clenching tightly. You stay. Alia was still that same old silly boy. He smiled sincerely and foolishly, shaking his head. The moment he smiled, the deep bloody cut on his face opened up again. You fool. Guo Xiaozhou glanced towards the hall, whispering, going out there means death. Yet Alia tried to push his hand away. In disbelief, Guo Xiaozhou glared at him. With no regard to whether there were people around, or whether Zhang Xian was watching, his stubbornness got the better of him and he grabbed Alia with all his strength, refusing to let him go. At that moment, the main gate opened. More people arrived. Guo Xiaozhou and Alia turned to look. The newcomers were a large party, with dozens of men carrying lanterns from the weaving and sewing bureau. Everyone carried a long knife about their waists, bringing about a solemn imposing air that overwhelmed even Zhang Xian, who slowly rose from his seat and only spoke with a sneer after some time, well, what a grand scene. Sitting on the sedan chair was Liao Jixiang. He was wearing a headband, with leather boots under the armor. His men were all clad in iron. From Meiaza to Yishiha, every one of them wore a short garment, every move of them exuding a chilling air of impending death. Alia brushed Guo Xiaozhou aside and walked determinedly towards his dugong. As he roughly wiped the blood from his face, he stood readily in his place. Meiaza helped Liao Jixiang down from the sedan chair, supporting his hand as he led Liao Jixiang into the hall. Everyone, the old and the young, obediently stood up and bowed their heads to respectfully welcome this young Dadang. Liao Jixiang's gaze didn't falter. He limped directly towards Zhang Xian. As he walked, he stole one secret eye contact with Xie Yulu. It was nothing but a fleeting glance, yet, like scalding oil burning the hand or a needle piercing through the skin, they both sensed a momentary impulse much like electric sparks. Xie Yulu quickly looked away, he dared not look. All it took was a single glance for all the obscene thoughts in his heart to be exposed. All it took was that one look, for the naked image of this man to invade his mind, who had once dumbly raised his hand and asked timidly, if I ate this, would I have an erection, too? Xie Yulu covered his face with his palm, afraid that his unusual bashfulness would attract the attention of those shrewd onlookers. By then, Liao Jixiang had taken his seat right next to Zhang Xian. They were so close by, that they could smell each other's scent. That lofty, cold sandalwood scent shot straight into Xie Yulu's heart like arrows. How many letters of emergency have been dispatched? Zhang Xian suddenly asked Tu Yao. Without waiting for his answer, Zhang Xian loudly slapped the table, where is Gong Nian? This anger was not directed at Tu Yao, rather, it was intended for Liao Jixiang. Yet Liao Jixiang remained elegant and composed. He genuinely resembled a bodhisattva or a Buddha, who displayed no attachment to worldly affairs. No one dared to make a sound. Every corner of the hall was extremely silent, so much so that the chirping of crickets from Zhang Xian's sleeve could be heard. Daylight soon came upon them. Although they spent a sleepless night here, no one felt drowsy at all, for the sounds of shouting and killing from the other end of the city could be clearly heard. At 1/4 the hour of Mao, Tu Yao organized the distribution of the first batch of pancakes. Golden shredded pancakes were given out, but some members of the Yang Society still complained softly, how come the Grand Mansion of Grand Supervising Eunuch of Nanjing can't even serve us a proper side dish? Zhang Xian was about to unleash his anger upon hearing that, but Meiaza fiercely kicked on the table first, there's only so much ration for so many mouths. If you want side dishes so badly, why don't you go out and buy them yourself? The complaining man didn't speak up again. All the members with him turned to look at Chu Feng one after another. Having no other choice, Chu Feng reluctantly supported himself up with his walking cane. The weaving and sewing bureau better stay silent. Speaking, he tossed a disrespectful glance at Liao Jixiang, just take a look at Nanjing today, isn't it all caused by Chu Feng? Xiao Lu shouted to interrupt him, his fierceness and aggressiveness alarmingly unusual. Chu Feng was taken aback for a moment, and stared blankly back at him. They were once close friends who talked about everything, yet now they were like strangers treading on separate paths. Deputy Minister Ye stood up to speak for Chu Feng. Xiao Lu, check where you're sitting. At the end of the day, you belong to the Ministry of War. Enough. Zheng Xian was finally furious. He flipped the small tea table abruptly with one hand, pointed at Deputy Minister Ye's nose and exclaimed, bullying this one's subordinate at this one's own house. If you want to stay, be quiet. If you can't, get the fuck out. Those words were very harsh. Deputy Minister Ye was at a respected age, yet he endured it without retorting and silently sat back down. It was clear that the sounds of fighting and killing in the city were getting louder and louder. Sometimes, a sudden scream or two would emerge out of nowhere, as if it happened right next to them. Apprehension grabbed hold of every soul in the hall. No one was willing to make any more random remarks or stir up trouble. At dusk, someone outside violently pounded the door. As the courtyard was silent, the abrupt bang sounded extremely ominous. The hall fell into chaos at once, with many elderly officials tremblingly shouting, "Don't open the door, and the mobs are attacking." After the guard verified the visitor, he opened the side door to admit them in, 2 agents of the Jin Yi and a eunuch. Tu Yao immediately whispered in Zheng Xian's ear, "Those practicing Xiongbu are back." /Note, Xiongbu is a specific way of fortune-telling in the Ming dynasty. The man who performs Xiongbu will carry a mirror and walk in the street and interpret the future by listening to the words of the passers-by. The eunuch came up the hall and fished out a small bronze mirror from his chest pocket. Zheng Xian leaned forward and asked, "What did you hear?" The eunuch appeared hesitant. The moment his hesitation showed, everyone in the hall understood the divination results. "All right. There's no need to say it out loud." Zheng Xian flicked his sleeve and turned his face aside gloomily. Tu Yao immediately leaned closer to him. Xiao Lu could vaguely hear him say, "Du Gong, we're cornered by them anyways. Since we still have 2,000 soldiers in our hands, why don't we fight our way?" "Fight for what?" Zheng Xian didn't give him any face. He loudly questioned Tu Yao, "For what?" Tu Yao was at a loss of words, his jaw half dropped. Without holding back, Zheng Xian blatantly said in front of everyone, "If others charge into battle, we will defend their backs." "But why should this one's men charge into battle? Why shouldn't they?" Tu Yao's face turned glistening red. He stiffened his neck, wanting to retort, yet all of a sudden, several members of the Yang society shouted, "Let's run." Liao Jixiang's half-closed eyes suddenly opened. "Doesn't Du Gongzheng have soldiers? We can be escorted and escape from the back door, and take the water route to Suzhou." Indeed, a proper honorable man would not stand under a dilapidated wall. Surprisingly, more than half of the officials concurred with this suggestion. Amidst the heated discussions, only Liao Jixiang announced coldly, "I'll see who dares to take a step out of this courtyard." He remained calm and still, like a block of iron or a pot of ice. With one hand, he drew out the short sword tied to his waist, and slammed it onto the table. Nanjing cannot run without officials for even one day. Zheng Xian looked at him in a provocative manner. "So, we'll wait here for death?" "Gong Nian," Liao Jixiang said dispassionately yet decisively, "is a man worth waiting for." There were 1,000 reasons to convince Zheng Xian of Tu Yao's preemptive strategy to fight, and 10,000 reasons more to convince him of Yang society's resourceful self-preservation. Only Liao Jixiang's words had no foundations. Yet, it seemed that those words were the ones that assured him. Zheng Xian lifted his tea, took a sip and spoke no more. Night gathered. Beyond the courtyard's walls over 10 feet tall, faint shimmering lights could be seen close and far. Those were the fires set by the rebelled soldiers and mobs. Many in the hall couldn't stand the exhaustion and fell asleep. From time to time, snores could be heard. Suddenly, a fire arrow shot out of nowhere into the hall, and landed precisely on Deputy Minister Yes' ankle. Amidst the elderly sorrow-filled wails, the high-ranked officials all eagerly scrambled towards the back of the hall. At that instant, regardless of whether they belonged to the eunuch's faction or the Yang Society, everyone was trapped in total chaos. Being stuck in the noisy crowd, Chu Feng realized that he had lost his walking cane. While he was struggling and staggering, someone nearby supported his arm. He looked back in gratitude. It was Jin Tang, wearing armor and carrying a long sword. He recalled that quiet corner, that secluded, humble quarter, and that unconventional, shocking, unpredicted kiss. Chu Feng rudely pulled his arm back and turned away in disdain. I felt so much remorse. Despite the chaos all around them, Jin Tang's trembling voice was clearly audible. May I ask you to soften your heart a little bit and forgive me for just once? Chu Feng avoided him without talking. I don't dare to do that ever again. I swear to the gods. Chu Feng appeared rather irritated, or perhaps, he looked like he had something to hide, which he didn't want anyone to find out. He turned his eyes to Jin Tang as if he was looking at something dirty. What do you think you are? You're only a eunuch. This statement was a sharp knife, slashing loudly through the air and cutting them apart. The stream of the crowd suddenly grew stronger, compelling Chu Feng to move forward. He didn't turn back again, oblivious to the immense pain that was tearing Jin Tang apart, leaving him far behind, lost in misery. It was noon of the next day when the next distribution of the pancakes began. Hundreds of people were stuffed together in the small hall of the inner courtyard, each extending their hands out like beggars. Yesterday, each person could receive 2 pancakes, but there was only 1 today. Curiously, no one complained this time. Zhang Chai and Yishiha were squeezing together, their hands tightly holding under their sleeves. Although he only had this small piece of pancake, Zhang Chai still tried to stuff it into Yishiha's hand. This pancake is too hard. I don't like it. Yishiha knew he was lying, so he waved away his hand. I don't want it. Take it. Zhang Chai played at throwing little tantrum again, frowning. I know your appetite. Hurry up. Yishiha stared at that piece of pancake. Then what about you? Zhang Chai giggled, repeating the same words. With you by my side, what do I have to fear? Yishiha hesitantly accepted the pancake and toyed it in his hands as if contemplating. Then, he asked in a whisper, what if, one day, I'm not around? Zhang Chai was full of confidence. Even in death, you'll have to follow me. At that moment, a loud clang came from the front courtyard. It was utterly heavy and frighteningly deep, as if it was an explosion from the depths of the earth. The hall fell silent instantly. Soon, a second clang followed. Zhang Chai and Yishiha were more than certain that this was the unmistakable sound of a battering ram pounding on the gate. They have a battering ram. Ruan Dian gestured to his men from a corner of the small hall, signaling them to gather around him. Tu Yao shielded Zhang Xian with his body, somewhat startled and confused. A battering ram. He had never led soldiers through a war. So, his battlefield experience was even less adequate compared to the scholarly Jin Tang. The 2,000 soldiers had previously withdrawn to the side courtyards on the east and west. Upon hearing Ruan Dian's words, they all unsheathed their long swords. After the almost synchronized metallic sound, the courtyard was filled by the dazzling glint of blades. Zhang Xian now looked absolutely frightened. He hastily ordered, "Ji, go and inquire my Fuji." Speaking, he waved towards Xie Yulu, who was not far away. Come. A Tanhua has good luck in the pen. /Note, Fuji is a method divination through spirit writing that tells the future of the user. To perform a ritual at a time like this. Xie Yulu felt reluctant to stand up. Yet Liao Jixiang stood up before him. He calmly called, Mei Azha. Mei Azha didn't respond immediately. Instead, he knelt determinedly with a loud plop. Dugong. Liao Jixiang forbade him to speak. Just look at the situation. Why are you still worrying about my broken leg? Mei Azha only paused for a brief moment, then he immediately stood up, and quickly arranged for people to help Liao Jixiang put on his armor. Those men were apparently all well trained. Before they could finish putting on his armor, Liao Jixiang majestically declared, "Where are my people?" From the small hall and down below, eunuchs stood up in unison. There were dozens of them, each carrying shiny long swords white as snow, as if they were long ready for their master's command. Aliu was among them. Seeing him, Guo Xiaozhou anxiously stomped his feet and implored, "Aliu cannot go. He's injured, he can't go out there and die for nothing." Liao Jixiang turned to glance at him. Aliu immediately squeezed through the crowd and knelt down beside him, his body covered in wounds. Like both a father and a mother, Liao Jixiang gently placed his hand on Aliu's head. He rubbed it gently, and slowly assured him, "Past the new year, you'll be 16. You're a man now, capable of choosing your own path." After finishing the sentence, he dragged his crippled leg, his head lifted high in the air, and stepped out of the crowd. His people followed him, and among them was Aliu, who sternly insisted to not look back at Guo Xiaozhou. Xie Yule was standing next to Zheng Xian, staring at that frail, slim receding figure. Back then, outside Lai Amanpo and beside Xiaolao Fountain, he had coveted and traced this back figure countless times. In immense desolation that shattered his heart, he fought back the urge to shout that name out loud and prostrate himself abruptly at Zheng Xian's feet, decisively bowing with a fist and palm salute, "Dugong, this one request to fight." Without waiting for Zheng Xian's reaction, Tu Yao knelt down as well. To Xie Yule's surprise, he too expressed the wish to fight. Zheng Xian was visibly enraged. In his fury, he didn't put on a stern expression, rather, he had an inexplicable smile on his face. "If you want to be heroes, this one won't say a word. But should you wish to go, go alone." He smiled with a gorgeous coldness. "Don't assume you can take a single soldier of mine with you." Tu Yao kept a solemn look without moving. Xie Yule stood up as he assumed the task. He looked down at his empty waist and said to Tu Yao, "Lend me a sword." Tu Yao's hand slowly moved towards his own Xiaochun sword. His hand first tightened around it, then it loosened its grip, apparently unwilling. Xie Yule smiled bitterly. He made his way out in resolution. As he walked, he stubbornly asked, "Among all the men here, who will come with me? Who would go with him?" The only response to him was a dead silence. "The weaving and sewing bureau is going," he shouted. Heads lowered in unison upon hearing his words. "So," he shouted again. "Liao Jixiang is going." "Nonsense." Unable to stand him anymore, Zheng Xian waved at his men below, "Take that fool down." Immediately, a few eunuchs went up and pinned Xie Yule down. He struggled with all his might, yet in the end, Tu Yao worked up his courage to knock him unconscious with a punch. When they listened again after the turmoil subsided, they noticed that the sounds of the battering rams at the gate had disappeared. In its place were intense clattering of weapons and shouting of men. Everyone was aware that those sounds belonged to the Weaving and Sewing Bureau, who were now soaked in blood and losing their lives, yet they all pretended to be deaf. Some even fetched their Buddhist beads to count, while the others simply shut their eyes as if in sleep. The sound of blades and spears were gradually pushed further and further from here. Everyone could sense the change. Liao Jixiang's men protected them with their own lives, while they, being so wise, sat on their 2,000 armored soldiers and refused to take the slightest risks. As the sun set in the west, the sounds of footsteps and hooves returned to the street. The people in the hall were drowning in apprehension again. This time, without Liao Jixiang stepping out for them, all they could do was to huddle together in fear, shuddering as they muttered prayers. Pray as they may, the footsteps were still coming in their direction. At least 100 of them. The gate of the inner courtyard was blocked with boulders, which was now being forcefully pushed open from the outside. "What are you waiting for?" Zhang Xian pointed at Tu Yao and the 2,000 soldiers, who were reserved for saving his life. "Get them up here." Before the men moved, the courtyard's gate was finally breached through. For an instant, everyone shivered. Those coming through the gate were a battalion of official soldiers, properly trained, well-organized soldiers. They were all clad in shiny leather armor, carrying small flags with a single character gong. "They are Gong Nian's men." Zhang Xian almost burst into ecstatic tears. He trembled as he stood up from his high seat, pushing through the crowd to personally greet his hero. From a distance, Gong Nian was also coming towards him, surrounded by all his soldiers. From about 5 or 6 steps away, he stopped. Instead of kneeling and saying the expected, "This general is late," he hurriedly scanned through the crowd and asked, "Where is Liao Jixiang?" He knew that man well. He must have led his men out to fight. Gong Nian slammed the bloodied longsword in his hand to the ground, and glared at Zhang Xian at the top of his rage. "He's a cripple." Then, he turned to question those around him, "How could you people let him go?" Zhang Xian's expression was almost indescribable. Like a hot stove suddenly extinguished by a bucket of water, or a brand new cabinet abruptly slashed in half. He appeared too downcast to be looked upon. It was at that moment when Liao Jixiang returned with his blood-drenched men. Mei Azha, Aliu, and others were all present. Only Jin Tang was being carried around, and he had a short knife deeply embedded between his ribs. They were almost blood figures, emanating the stench of death from head to toe. Tu Yao stared at them blankly, as if he had never seen such a sight before, as if he had witnessed something that seduced him long ago in his dreams. He dashed out from behind and quickly instructed his men to carry Jin Tang to the backyard. Liao Jixiang had no major injuries, although the thick leather on his chest plate was completely destroyed with cuts. When he saw Gong Nian, he smiled like a pleasant breeze or drizzle in spring. After the smile, his face suddenly froze. Then, like how Gong Nian searched for him in the crowd, he anxiously searched for something else. With trembling lips, he slowly and hesitantly asked, "Where is Xie Yulu?" Gong Nian frowned. Liao Jixiang turned around and looked into various corners, but he did not find him. He was nowhere to be found. He wasn't here. "Where is Xie Yulu?" Unable to contain himself anymore, he shouted, leaving everyone stunned as they stared at him with both fear and confusion. Liao Jixiang felt that he couldn't hold on any longer. His knees were shaking non-stop. With merely the briefest imagination of Xie Yulu's possible fate, his long sword slipped from his hand and smashed on the ground, producing a loud clang. He couldn't even be bothered to pick up the sword, he turned and dashed out. Through the wide-open gate of the inner courtyard, he could see the disordered mess and destruction in the front courtyard. Among the wreckage was a broken door, which was knocked down from the door frame by the battering ram. Through what was left of the door, he could see the desolate streets after the war. Suddenly, out came a man turning from the street lit with crimson sunset. It was a tall figure carrying a plow. The head of the plow was stained with blood and the man carrying it had a hunched back. That shabby figure was none other than Xie Yulu. The violently boiling water in Liao Jixiang's heart instantly cooled down. To him, seeing that man felt like a bird locating the branch for the nest, or a chess piece returning to its position. He felt settled. From a distance, Xie Yulu saw him, too. He dropped the plow and ran towards him. After running for a few steps, he slowed down as if he remembered something, and cautiously avoided eye contact with him. End chapter.